In the heart of Manhattan, where the city's pulse thrums with ambition and secrets, a velvet night draped itself over the skyline. The glittering lights of skyscrapers pierced the darkness, casting a kaleidoscope of reflections across the glass facade of La Lumière, an upscale restaurant nestled in the shadow of 1 Inside, the air was thick with the scent of truffle oil and aged wine, the clink of crystal glasses mingling with the soft hum of jazz. But in a secluded booth veiled by heavy burgundy curtains, a conversation unfolded that would unravel the delicate threads of trust binding 3 lives together. Alberto sat with an air of practiced nonchalance, his blonde hair catching the dim glow of the chandelier above his blue eyes, sharp yet restless. His white dress shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, hinted at a man caught between sophistication and unease. Across from him, Catherine exuded a dangerous elegance, her black silk dress clinging to her frame like a whispered promise. Her crimson lipstick gleamed as she leaned forward, her gaze predatory, her fingers tracing the stem of a wine glass with deliberate grace. Between them, a bottle of Chateau Margaux stood sentinel, its deep red contents untouched, as if mirroring the tension that hung in the air. "Careful," Catherine Alberto murmured, his voice low, barely rising above the strains of a saxophone. "Someone might see us." His fingers tightened around his glass, betraying the calm he tried to project. The restaurant buzzed with the chatter of Manhattan's elite bankers, influencers, and hedge fund moguls. But in this private enclave, their words were a dangerous secret, meant for no one else's ears. Catherine's lips curled into a sharp, knowing smile as she lightly brushed her hand against his. "Relax, Alberto," she purred, her voice a velvet blade. "Polaris is too busy ruling her empire on Wall Street to notice us here." Her words dripped with a casual cruelty, as if Polaris, the woman they both betrayed, was merely a footnote in their clandestine dance. She leaned back, her eyes glinting with something darker, perhaps ambition, or the thrill of forbidden desire. Alberto took a slow sip of wine, the liquid catching the light like blood in a crystal chalice. His jaw tightened. Guilt flickered across his face momentarily, a shadow passing over his chiseled features. "She trusts you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking her name, Polaris might summon her presence. "She trusts us." Catherine's smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. She tilted her head, her dark hair cascading over one shoulder like a curtain of secrets. "And she trusted you too, didn't she?" she said, her tone laced with mockery. Yet here we are, Alberto, sipping wine in the dark while she's buried in board meetings and balance sheets. She reached for her glass, her movements deliberate, each gesture a calculated performance. Trust is a blindfold, darling. It makes people see only what they want to see. The words hung between them, heavy with truth and treachery. Alberto shifted in his seat, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on the table. He remembered the first time he met Polaris, her radiant smile cutting through the gray monotony of his life. She was a force of nature, a Black American woman who had clawed her way to the top of Wall Street, her intelligence and charisma easily commanding boardrooms. Her company, Aquino Ventures, was a titan in the world of finance, and she had pulled Alberto from obscurity, giving him a place in her world, her heart. But now that world felt like a cage, and Catherine was the key dangling just out of reach. Alberto said, "I didn't plan for this," and his voice was rough with conflict. He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes fixed on the untouched plate of appetizers, artichoke hearts and caviar, a mockery of the opulence surrounding them. "I loved her, Catherine. I really did." Catherine's laugh was soft, almost musical, but it carried a sting. Loved her, she echoed, her brow arching. Yet you run to me whenever her empire demands too much of you. Whenever her meetings stretch into the night or her ambition overshadows your ego, you find solace in my arms. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Don't pretend you're the victim here, Alberto. You chose this. You chose me. The accusation landed like a blade, and Alberto's silence was its own confession. He stared at the wine glass swirling the liquid as if it held the answers he couldn't find. Outside their booth, the restaurant pulsed with life servers gliding between tables, the clatter of silverware, the laughter of strangers. But within their cocoon time seemed to slow, each second weighted with the gravity of their betrayal. Catherine's fingers brushed the rim of her glass, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. What's your plan, Alberto? She asked, her tone shifting from playful to pointed. How long do we keep hiding? How long before you stop pretending you can have us both? Her words were a challenge, a dare to confront the truth he'd been avoiding. Alberto's jaw clenched, his gaze flickering to the curtains, as if expecting Polaris to enter them. It's not that simple, he said, his voice strained. You know why. Polaris. She's the one with the power, the money. Everything I have, my car, my apartment, my position, is because of her. Catherine's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. Please don't insult me, she snapped, her voice low but venomous. You think I don't know that? You think I don't see the Rolex on your wrist? The penthouse you call home, all paid for by her success. She leaned forward, her eyes boring into his. But let's not pretend you're innocent. You're here because you want to be, and are tired of playing second fiddle to her ambition. Alberto's hand froze on his glass, the truth of her words sinking in. He thought of Polaris, her fierce determination, her late nights poring over financial reports, her unwavering belief in him. She had built him up, given him a life he could never have dreamed of as a struggling accountant. But with every promotion, every accolade, he felt smaller in her shadow, and Catherine had been there whispering promises of freedom, of a life where he could be more than an accessory to Polaris's success. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Catherine leaned back, her composure returning as she sipped her wine. We're both guilty, Alberto, she said softly, her voice almost tender now. But at least I'm honest with myself. I know what I want. The question is, do you? Alberto's eyes met hers, and for a moment he saw not just Catherine, but the reflection of his weakness. He opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he reached for his glass, draining it in one swallow, as if the wine could wash away the guilt gnawing at his soul. Catherine's gaze softened, but her eyes showed a glint of triumph. She reached into her purse, pulling out her phone with a deliberate slowness that made Alberto's heart skip a beat. The screen lit up, casting a pale glow across her face as she tapped it to life. She said, I have something to show you, her voice, a low purr. Something to make things clearer. Alberto's breath hitched as the video began to play. The images were unmistakable. He and Catherine tangled in a hotel room, their bodies pressed together in a moment of reckless passion. The camera angle was unforgiving, capturing every detail with cruel clarity. His face paled, his hands trembling as he stared at the screen. Catherine, what are you doing? He whispered, his voice barely audible. Relax, she said, her smile returning sharp and dangerous. I haven't sent this to Polaris. Not yet. She paused, letting the threat linger in the air. But one wrong move, and she'll know everything. What do you think will happen when she sees this? When she realizes the man she loves has been lying to her face? Alberto's heart pounded, his mind racing. Why are you doing this? He asked. his voice shaking with a mix of fear and anger. "I thought you loved me." "I do," Catherine replied, her tone softening, but her eyes remained cold. "That's why I'm tired of waiting. I want clarity, Alberto. I want you to choose. If it's her, then walk away from me. But if it's me—" She leaned closer, her breath warm against his ear. "Then, prove it." The weight of her ultimatum settled over him like a storm cloud. He gripped the table's edge, his knuckles white as the restaurant's din faded into a distant hum. He saw Polaris in his mind, her warm brown eyes' infectious laugh, and how she made him feel like he could conquer the world. But then he saw Catherine, her fierce beauty, her promises of a life unbound by Polaris's relentless ambition. The choice was a blade. No matter how he turned, it would cut. Catherine watched him, her expression unreadable. "Time's running out." "Alberto," she said, her voice a quiet warning. "When Polaris calls me asking why I suddenly resigned from her company, you'd better have an answer. Because if I have to explain—" She let the sentence trail off her smile, a silent threat. The booth seemed to close around them, the curtains a barrier between their secret and the outside world. Alberto's mind was a whirlwind of guilt, fear, and longing. He wanted to run, escape the trap he'd woven around himself. But at that moment, Catherine's eyes locked on his, and he knew there was no escape. Not yet. As the jazz swelled, a waiter passed by, oblivious to the storm behind the curtains. Somewhere across the city, Polaris sat in her office, her dark curls framing her face as she reviewed contracts, unaware that the two people she trusted most were plotting her downfall. The night was still young, but its shadows were long and treacherous. The restaurant's lights dimmed as the evening deepened, the city outside pulsing with life. Alberto and Catherine remained in their booth, their conversation a tightrope between desire and danger. But in the heart of Manhattan, secrets have a way of unraveling, and the truth, like the city itself, waits for no one. High above the glittering sprawl of Manhattan, in a penthouse overlooking the Hudson River, Polaris, Aquino, stood as a vision of strength and vulnerability entwined. Her skin, a rich ebony, glowed under the soft light of a crystal chandelier, her curls cascading freely, framing a face that held both the fire of a Wall Street titan and the tenderness of a woman in love. She wore a cream cashmere sweater, its softness a stark contrast to the sharp edges of her world, and her brown eyes sparkled with dreams as she gazed out at the city below. Alberto sat beside her on a plush velvet sofa, his blonde hair slightly mussed, his blue eyes catching the reflection of the river's ripples. The penthouse was their sanctuary, a haven from the relentless pace of New York's financial district, but tonight it carried the weight of unspoken truths. Polaris turned to Alberto, her smile radiant, her voice a melody of hope. "Do you ever think about leaving all this behind?" she asked, her fingers tracing the edge of a throw blanket draped across her lap. "The meetings, the deadlines, the endless chase for the next big deal. To have a life that's ours." Her words were a whisper of longing, a glimpse into a heart that, despite its command of boardrooms, yearned for simplicity. Alberto's lips curved into a smile, but it was fragile, shadowed by the secrets he carried. He reached for her hand, his touch warm but hesitant, as if afraid to hold too tightly. "All the time," he said, his voice low, laced with a sincerity that felt both genuine and strained. "But you, Polaris, you're a force of nature. This city, this empire, it's who you are." She laughed softly like wind chimes in a summer breeze and shook her head. "It's not all of me," she said, her eyes searching his. "I want a house in Alberto, Connecticut. Not a mansion, just a place with big windows and a garden full of lavender and rosemary. Somewhere we can wake up to birdsong, Instead of alarms, walk to a farmer's market and pick out fresh peaches for breakfast. Her voice softened her dreams, painting a picture of a life unburdened by ambition. I see us there, you know. You with your coffee, me with my sketchbook, just living. Alberto's heart ached at her words, each a reminder of the woman who had lifted him from the ashes of a mundane life. Polaris had seen potential in him when he was just a junior accountant drowning in spreadsheets and self-doubt. She had given him purpose, a place in her world, a love that felt like a gift he didn't deserve. But now, as she spoke of a future filled with quiet moments and shared laughter, he felt the weight of his betrayal pressing against his chest, a silent scream he couldn't release. He squeezed her hand, forcing a smile. That sounds perfect, he said, his voice catching slightly. You and me. No boardrooms, no investors. Just us. But even as he spoke, his mind drifted to the booth at La Lumiere, to Catherine's crimson lips, and the video that could shatter this fragile dream. He pushed the thought away, burying it beneath the warmth of Polaris's gaze. Polaris leaned closer, her head resting against his shoulder, her curls brushing his cheek. I know it's silly, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I run a company that moves millions daily, but sometimes I want to be ordinary. I want to have a life where I'm not Polaris Aquino's CEO, but just Polaris, the woman who loves you. Her words were a confession, raw and unguarded, and they pierced Alberto's heart like a shard of glass. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close, his lips brushing the top of her head. You're never just anything, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. You're everything, Polaris. The words were valid, but they tasted like ash in his mouth, tainted by the lies he couldn't confess. He wanted to believe in her dream, to see himself in that Connecticut house sipping coffee on a porch while she sketched the sunrise. But the shadow of Catherine loomed, her whispers echoing in his mind, pulling him toward a choice he wasn't ready to make. The penthouse was quiet, save for the distant hum of the city below and the soft crackle of a fire in the hearth. Polaris nestled closer, her hand resting on his chest, as if she could feel the rhythm of his heart and find solace in it. I want kids. You know, she said suddenly, her voice bright with a shy excitement. 2 boys and a girl. The eldest would be quiet, thoughtful, maybe a little like you. The youngest would be a whirlwind, always getting into trouble. And our girl, she'd be our princess with your eyes and my stubbornness. Alberto's breath caught. The image was so vivid that it felt like a memory. He could see her laughter filling a sunlit kitchen, children running through a garden, their voices a symphony of joy. But the vision was tainted by guilt, by the knowledge that he was betraying the woman who dreamed of this future with him. 3 kids, huh? He said, forcing a chuckle. You're planning a whole dynasty. She swatted his arm playfully, her laughter bright and unguarded. Not a dynasty, just a family, she said. A home filled with noise and love and chaos. I want music in every room, Alberto. I want to hear you play that old guitar you hide in the closet while I'm cooking dinner, and the kids are arguing over who gets the last cookie. Her eyes sparkled, her dreams weaving a tapestry of hope that felt almost tangible. Alberto's heart twisted, torn between her vision's warmth and his choice's cold reality. He remembered the first time he played for her in a dive bar in Brooklyn, his fingers fumbling over the strings as she watched her smile brighter than the stage lights. She had believed in him then as she did now, and that belief was both his salvation and his curse. You're too good to me, he said softly, his voice barely hiding the tremor of guilt. Nonsense, she replied, tilting her head to meet his gaze. You're the one who showed me I could be more than my work. You made me believe in forever, Alberto. Her words were a vow, a promise wrapped around his heart and squeezed until it hurt. She leaned up, pressing a gentle kiss to his lips. her touch a reminder of everything he stood to lose. The city outside continued its restless dance as they sat there wrapped in each other's warmth. The Hudson River shimmered under the moonlight, its surface mirroring the dreams and deceptions that swirled within the penthouse. Polaris spoke of a future filled with love, unaware that Alberto's heart was a battleground, torn between the woman he loved and the temptation that threatened to destroy them both. In another part of the city, Catherine sat in her sleek Soho apartment, her phone glowing with the video that held Alberto's fate. She sipped a glass of wine, her mind racing with plans and possibilities. She had clawed her way into this world of wealth and power, and wasn't about to let Polaris's empire stand in her way. The video was her trump card, a weapon to force Alberto's hand to claim the life she believed she deserved. Back in the penthouse, Polaris stood stretching her arms with a contented sigh. "Come on," she said, pulling Alberto to his feet. "Let's dance." She flicked on the sound system, and a soft jazz melody filled the room, its notes wrapping around them like a lover's embrace. They swayed together, her head against his chest, the world outside fading into insignificance. But as they danced, Alberto's mind was elsewhere, haunted by the booth at La Lumière, by Catherine's ultimatum, by the video that could unravel everything. He held Polaris tighter, as if he could anchor himself to her, to the dream she painted with her words. But deep down, he knew the truth. His secrets were a storm on the horizon, and no amount of dancing could keep it at bay. The night stretched, the city's lights twinkling like stars in a sky that held no mercy. Polaris dreamed of a future filled with love, unaware that the man in her arms was slipping away, drawn into a web of betrayal that would soon shatter her world. And as the jazz played on, the first cracks in their love began to form, silent but inevitable, waiting for the moment they would break. The Manhattan skyline shimmered like a constellation of broken promises, its lights flickering against the inky canvas of a late September night. In her sleek office on the 40th floor of a midtown tower, Polaris Aquino sat alone, her silhouette framed against a floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the restless city. Her dark curls were pulled into a loose bun, strands escaping to frame her face, where strength and vulnerability waged a silent war. The glow of her tablet cast shadows across her ebony skin, illuminating eyes that brimmed with unshed tears. The world she had built, Aquino Ventures, a financial juggernaut that had made her a legend on Wall Street, was crumbling not under the weight of market crashes or corporate missteps, but from a wound far more personal. A video had surfaced, spreading like wildfire across the digital landscape. It was grainy, deliberately provocative, showing a woman who bore an uncanny resemblance to Polaris in a compromising embrace, her face unmistakable to those who knew her. The headlines screamed from every corner of the internet. New York Post blared, "CEO Polaris Aquino caught in scandal, truth or smear." Gawker sneered, "Wall Street's golden girl falls from grace." And X buzzed with hashtags, #Polaris, scandal, #fraud, or fact, each post a dagger to her reputation. The comments were merciless, a cacophony of judgment from strangers who had never met her, yet felt entitled to dissect her life. Polaris's fingers trembled as she replayed the video for the 10th time, her breath catching in her throat. The woman on the screen moved with a confidence that mimicked her own. But the setting, a dimly lit hotel room, the air heavy with illicit intimacy, was foreign, a lie crafted to destroy her. "This isn't me," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread in the silence of her office. The tablet slipped from her hands, clattering onto the polished mahogany desk, and she pressed her palms to her face, as if she could shield herself from the world's gaze. She had built Aquino Ventures from nothing, a black woman defying the odds in a privileged, dominated world. Her intelligence, tenacity, and unyielding belief in her vision earned her a seat at tables where she was often the only one who looked like her. But now that legacy was reduced to a sordid clip, a mockery of her strength. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was personal, a wound cut deeper than any corporate coup. Her thoughts turned to Alberto, the man whose love had once felt like a lighthouse in the storm of her ambition. His blonde hair, easy smile, and how he'd held her in their penthouse just nights ago, promising a future of lavender gardens and lazy mornings, were anchors in her heart. She reached for her phone, her fingers hesitating before dialing his number. Surely he would see through this lie. Surely he would stand by her side. The call connected, and his voice came through cool and distant like a stranger's. Polaris. He said, his tone devoid of the warmth she craved. I've seen the video. Her heart plummeted, but she clung to hope, her voice trembling yet resolute. Alberto, it's not me. You know me better than this. Someone made that video to ruin me, to ruin us. She paced the office, her heels clicking against the marble floor, her words spilling out in a desperate plea. It's a fake, a deep fake something. I'd never betray you. Silence stretched across the line, heavy and suffocating. When Alberto spoke again, his words were a blade sharp and cold. It's too clear, Polaris. Your face, your voice, it's everywhere. People are talking, investors are pulling out. I don't know who to believe anymore. His voice cracked, but there was no comfort in it, only accusation. I thought I knew you. The words struck her like a physical blow, stealing her breath. She stopped pacing, her hand gripping the edge of her desk for support. You do know me, she said, her voice breaking. You know I'd never do this to you, to us. Alberto, please, you have to trust me. But trust was a fragile thing, and his following words shattered it. I can't do this, he said, his voice hollow. I can't be with someone at the center of this mess. My name and family are tied to you now, and I can't handle the fallout. I'm sorry, Polaris. We're done. The line went dead, leaving her with nothing but the echo of his words and the weight of her heartbreak. She sank into her chair, her vision blurring as tears spilled down her cheeks, tracing paths of silent agony. The city outside continued its relentless pulse, indifferent to the woman whose world was unraveling within its glass towers. She thought of their nights together, whispered promises under the Hudson's glow, and dreams that now felt like cruel illusions. Alberto had been her partner, her confidant, who had seen her vulnerabilities and promised to cherish them. But now he was gone, abandoning her at the first sign of scandal, leaving her to face the wolves alone. Her assistant, Kara, knocked softly before entering, her face etched with concern. Ma'am, the board members are asking for a statement, she said, her voice gentle but urgent. The press is outside, and X is exploding with speculation. They need to hear from you. Polaris wiped her tears, her jaw tightening as she stood. Tell them I'll address it tomorrow, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. No one comes in tonight. Kara nodded, retreating quietly, leaving Polaris to the solitude of her shattered empire. She walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass, the city's lights blurring through her tears. She thought of her mother, who had raised her alone in Harlem, teaching her that strength was not the absence of pain, but the courage to rise above it. Polaris had built her life on that lesson, climbing from a scholarship student to a Wall Street titan. But now, as the world turned against her, she felt that strength slipping away, replaced by a hollow ache that threatened to consume her. Yet even in her despair, a spark of defiance flickered. She wasn't the woman in that video, and wouldn't let a lie define her. She picked up her tablet, scrolling through the vicious comments, the headlines, the memes that mocked her name. Each one was a wound, but they also fueled a fire within her, a determination to reclaim her truth, to fight for the life she had built. In the distance, the Empire State Building glowed a beacon of resilience in a city that never slept. Polaris took a deep breath, her hands steadying as she made a silent vow. She would not be broken, not by a scandal betrayal, or the man who had turned his back on her. The night was dark, but she would find her light again, even if it meant walking through the fire alone. As she stood there, the city's pulse seemed to sync with her own, a reminder that she was still fighting. Somewhere in the shadows, the truth waited to be uncovered, and Polaris Aquino, with her heart bruised but unbroken, would find it no matter the cost. The Hamptons stretched before the ocean like a canvas of dreams, its dunes whispering secrets to the waves that crashed against the shore. In the fading light of a late summer evening, Polaris Aquino drove her sleek black Tesla along the winding roads, the salt air seeping through the open window to mingle with the ache in her heart. Her ebony skin glowed under the golden hues of dusk, her curls loose and wild, as if mirroring the storm within her. The scandal that had erupted days ago still clung to her like a shadow, its venom spreading through headlines and whispers, threatening to unravel everything she had built. But tonight, it wasn't the scandal that drove her to this secluded villa. It was a deeper, more personal wound, a suspicion that had taken root in her soul. The villa, a modernist masterpiece of glass and cedar, stood sentinel against the dunes, its windows reflecting the last rays of the sun. It was her sanctuary, where she and Alberto had once woven dreams of a future together, their laughter echoing through its halls. As she parked and stepped out, the air felt heavy, charged with a foreboding that quickened her pulse. She clutched her phone, her fingers brushing against its cold surface, as if it could anchor her against the tide of dread. The front door was unlocked, a detail that sent a shiver down her spine. She stepped inside the house's silence, broken only by the distant murmur of voices, familiar, intimate, and unmistakably wrong. Her heels clicked softly against the hardwood floor as she moved toward the main bedroom, her heart a drumbeat of fear and resolve. The voices grew louder, laced with laughter and sighs. And as she reached the door slightly ajar, the truth she had feared unfurled before her, like a wound laid bare. In the soft glow of a bedside lamp, Alberto and Catherine were there, their bodies entwined on the bed that had once been a haven for Polaris's dreams. Alberto's blonde hair was tousled, his blue eyes half closed in a moment of reckless abandon, while Catherine's dark hair spilled across the pillows, her laughter a cruel melody. They were oblivious to the world, lost in their betrayal, as if the villa's walls could shield them from the consequences of their choices. Polaris's breath caught her heart splintering as she watched the man she loved and the friend she trusted shatter her world. But where pain might have broken another, it forged something more substantial in her, a steely resolve that burned brighter than her grief. She raised her phone, her hands steady, despite the tremor in her soul, and began recording. The camera captured every detail, their whispered words, careless touches, and undeniable proof of their deceit. She let the video run, her silence a weapon, her composure a shield. When she had had enough, she lowered the phone and flicked on the overhead light, bathing the room in a stark, unforgiving glow. "Well, isn't this a sight?" she said, her voice a blade of ice cutting through the air. Alberto scrambled to his feet, his face paling as he clutched a sheet to cover himself, his eyes wide with panic. Catherine froze, pulling the bedsheet tighter, her expression a mix of shock and defiance. "Polaris, this isn't what you think," Alberto stammered, his voice frantic, his hands reaching out as if he could pull her back into his lies. "It's a mistake, I swear." "A mistake." Polaris's laugh was bitter, sharp enough to draw blood. She stepped forward, her presence commanding, despite the pain in her features. "No, Alberto. A mistake is forgetting a meeting or misplacing a file." This she gestured to the bed, to Catherine, to the wreckage of their trust. "This is a choice. Catherine's eyes darted away, unable to meet Polaris's gaze. She clutched the sheet, her knuckles white, but said nothing. Her silence a confession. Polaris turned to her, her voice steady, but laced with a quiet fury. "And you, Catherine, my friend, my sister, or so I thought. How long have you been smiling in my face while stabbing me in the back?" Alberto stepped forward, his voice desperate. "Polaris, please let me explain." "There's nothing to explain." She cut him off, her eyes blazing with a fire that belied the tears threatening to spill. "I saw the glances, the late-night texts, the way you hesitated when I asked if we were okay. I ignored it because I loved you, because I trusted you both." Her voice wavered, but she pressed on her words a torrent of truth. "But I won't ignore this. Not anymore." She held up her phone. The video paused on an image that left no room for doubt. "This is my insurance," she said, her tone cold and resolute. "You thought you could destroy me with a fake video? Well, this one's honest, and it will cost you everything." Catherine finally spoke, her voice trembling but defiant. "She said it wasn't supposed to be like this," her eyes flickering with guilt and desperation. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Polaris. It just happened." Polaris's laugh was a hollow thing devoid of humor. "It just happened," she echoed, stepping closer, her presence a storm of righteous anger. "You don't accidentally betray someone you call a sister. You don't accidentally sleep with the man I love in our shared bed." She turned to Alberto, her gaze piercing. "And you used my love, my trust to build your life. The car, the apartment, the opportunities, all because of me. And this is how you repay me." Alberto's face crumpled, his hands shaking as he reached for her. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I love you, Polaris. I didn't want this." "Don't," she snapped, stepping back, her eyes flashing with pain and resolve. "Your love means nothing to me now. It's just words, empty and worthless." She turned to Catherine, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "And you, Catherine, take him. He's yours. But know this, I won't let you walk away unscathed." She turned on her heel, her movements deliberate, her dignity intact, despite the shards of her heart scattered across the room. As she walked out, the villa's silence closed around her, heavy with the weight of what she had lost. But in that silence, a new strength was born, a determination to reclaim her life, truth, and power. Outside, the ocean roared its waves, a chorus of defiance that matched the fire in her soul. Polaris climbed into her car, her hands steady as she saved the video to a secure cloud. The scandal that had broken her was a lie, but this truth was hers to wield, a weapon forged in pain and betrayal. She drove back to Manhattan, the city's lights a beacon in the darkness, guiding her toward a fight she was ready to wage. Alberto and Catherine sat in stunned silence in the villa, the weight of their actions crashing down around them. They had thought themselves untouchable, their secret safe in the shadows. But Polaris was no longer the trusting woman they had deceived. She was a force, a reckoning, and as the night deepened, they would soon learn the cost of crossing her. The Brooklyn night was alive with the hum of life, its streets pulsing with the rhythm of a city that refused to sleep. In a modest brownstone, on a quiet corner of Park Slope, Polaris, Aquino sat on a worn leather couch, her silhouette softened by the glow of a single lamp. Her dark curls spilled over her shoulders, framing a face etched with the weight of betrayal. The scandal that had engulfed her, her face plastered across a fabricated video, her name dragged through the mud of New York's tabloids, had left her reeling, a warrior stripped of her armor. Yet, in the stillness of this unfamiliar sanctuary, a new spark flickered within her, an ember of resolve kindled by the presence of an unexpected ally. Isaac stood by the window, his broad frame outlined against the city's glow. His white skin caught the moonlight, his dark hair neatly trimmed, his posture rigid, yet comforting, like a lighthouse standing firm against a storm. He was her father's bodyguard, a man of few words, whose quiet strength had always lingered in the periphery of her life. Tonight, though, he was more than a shadow. He was a beacon, his hazel eyes fixed on her with a steadiness that felt like a promise. "You don't have to do this alone," Isaac said, his voice low, resonant with a sincerity that cut through the haze of her grief. He turned from the window, his movements deliberate, as if each step was a vow to stand by her side. "I know what it's like to be betrayed, Polaris. To have your trust shattered by someone you thought you knew." Polaris looked up, her brown eyes searching his, her heart a battlefield of pain and curiosity. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice soft, but threaded with a need to understand. The room was warm with the faint aroma of cedar and coffee, starkly contrasting to the cold sterility of her Manhattan office, where she had faced the scandal's wrath. Isaac sat across from her, his hands clasped, his gaze unwavering. "Catherine." He said the name falling like a stone into the silence. "She was my first love back when I was just a kid from Queens with nothing but dreams and a chip on my shoulder. I thought she was my future, but she used my connections, my trust to climb into the world of the elite. She left me behind, Polaris, the moment she saw a better opportunity." The confession hung between them, raw and unguarded, and Polaris felt a pang of recognition. She leaned forward, her hands gripping the edge of the couch, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you tell me before? All those years you've been around watching over me for my father. You never said a word." Isaac's lips curved into a faint, bittersweet smile. "It wasn't my place," he said. "My job was to protect you, not burden you with my past. But seeing you now fighting this storm, I can't stay silent anymore. You're stronger than you know, Polaris, but you don't have to carry this alone." Her heart stirred a quiet warmth, blooming amidst the wreckage of her trust. She thought of the villa in the Hamptons, where she had caught Alberto and Catherine in their betrayal, the video now safely stored in her cloud, a weapon waiting to be wielded. She thought of the headlines, the cruel hashtags, the investors who had turned their backs. But in this modest brownstone, Isaac's words were a lifeline pulling her from despair. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice steadier now, her eyes meeting his with a flicker of determination. "I have the video of them, but it's not enough. The scandal, they think it's me. They think I'm the one who fell." Isaac leaned closer, his presence a steady anchor. "We start with the truth," he said, his voice a quiet fire. "That video of you is fake, and we'll prove it. We'll trace its origins, find who made it and who spread it. And Alberto," his jaw tightened, a flash of anger in his eyes. "He's been siphoning money from Aquino Ventures. I've seen the signs, offshore accounts, shell companies. We'll expose him, Polaris, but we'll do it smart. No mistakes." Her breath caught the weight of his words, igniting a spark of hope. She had always seen Isaac as a silent guardian, a man whose loyalty was a given, but whose depth she had never explored. Now, as he spoke of a plan to reclaim her life, she saw him anew, a man who had known betrayal and carried his own scars, yet chose to stand with her in her darkest hour. "How do you know all this?" she asked, her voice tinged with awe and curiosity. "You're a bodyguard, Isaac, not a detective." He chuckled, a warm, low sound softening the room's edges. He said, "I've been around your father's world long enough to learn a few things. I've got contacts, people who owe me favors, a hacker in Williamsburg, a lawyer in Midtown. We'll build a case piece by piece until the world sees the truth. But more than that, Polaris." He paused, his eyes locking with hers, a quiet intensity in his gaze. "I believe in you. I always have." The words wrapped around her heart a balm to the wounds left by Alberto's abandonment. She thought of their years together, of the way Isaac had always been there, silent, steadfast, a shadow who never faltered. She remembered a night years ago when she had cried alone in her father's office after a failed deal, unaware that Isaac had been outside watching over her, ensuring her safety. His presence had been a constant, a quiet strength she had taken for granted until now. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "After everything, Alberto, Catherine, the scandal, I thought I was alone. But you're here and I—" She trailed off, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, not of sorrow, but of gratitude. "You're never alone," Isaac said, his voice a gentle vow. "Not as long as I'm here." He reached out his hand, hovering for a moment, before resting lightly on hers, a touch that was both tentative and resolute. "We'll fight this together, Polaris. For your name, your company, your heart." The room seemed to hold its breath, the city's hum fading into a distant murmur. Polaris felt the weight of his hand, the warmth of his promise, and for the first time since the scandal broke, she felt a flicker of hope. She thought of her mother's words whispered in their Harlem apartment years ago. "Strength is not in never falling, but in rising every time you do." With Isaac by her side, she could rise again. She would rise again. They spent the night planning, their voices low, their minds sharp. Isaac outlined a strategy: hire a forensic IT expert to trace the video's source, subpoena financial records to uncover Alberto's fraud, and prepare a legal case to reclaim her company's shares. Polaris listened, her resolve growing with each word, her heart finding solace in his certainty. With its creaking floors and mismatched furniture, the brownstone became a war room, where two wounded souls forged a pact to reclaim what was stolen. As dawn broke over Brooklyn, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold, Polaris stood by the window, her reflection merging with the city's awakening. Isaac stood behind her, his presence a quiet strength, his silence a promise that needed no words. She turned to him, her eyes bright with a fire that had been dimmed but never extinguished. "Thank you, Isaac," she said, her voice soft but resolute, "for seeing me even when I couldn't see myself." He smiled, a rare, genuine smile that lit up his face. "I've always seen you, Polaris," he said, "and I'll be here every step of the way until the world sees you too." The city stirred, its pulse quickening as the sun rose. Polaris Aquino, battered but unbroken, stood ready to fight, not just for her name, but for the woman she was becoming, with an ally whose loyalty was a light in the darkness, guiding her toward redemption. The autumn air carried a crisp promise of change as it swept through the streets of Williamsburg, where the city's creative heart beat in a symphony of graffiti and ambition. In a loft tucked above a bustling coffee shop, Polaris Aquino sat at a cluttered table, her dark curls pulled back, her brown eyes sharp with purpose. The scandal that had threatened to bury her was now a challenge to be conquered, its lies a puzzle she was determined to unravel. Across from her, Isaac leaned forward, his hazel eyes scanning a laptop screen, his presence a steady anchor in the storm of her resolve. The loft was their command center, with its exposed brick and flickering Edison bulbs, where truth would be forged from the ashes of betrayal. The video Polaris had recorded in the Hamptons, Alberto and Catherine caught in their treachery, was a weapon, but it was not enough. The world still saw her as the woman in the fake scandal video, her reputation tarnished by headlines and hashtags. But here in this eclectic space with Isaac by her side, she felt the stirrings of a plan that could turn the tide, a strategy to reclaim her name and expose those who had sought to destroy her. Isaac said, "We've got a lead." His voice, a low rumble, his fingers pausing on the laptop. "A friend of mine, Lena, is a hacker who works out of Red Hook. She traced the IP address of the first upload. It came from a server in Jersey City, linked to a PR firm known for dirty tricks. He turned the screen toward Polaris, showing a chain of emails that laid bare a chilling truth. The video was a deliberate fabrication, commissioned by someone with deep pockets and deeper malice. Polaris's breath caught her heart racing as she read the emails. The words were clinical and transactional, detailing payments to an actress who could mimic her likeness and instructions to stage the video to maximize damage. They planned this, she whispered, her voice a mix of fury and awe. They wanted to ruin me, to take everything I've built. Her fingers tightened around the table's edge, her nails digging into the wood, as if anchoring her to reality. Isaac's hand brushed hers, a fleeting touch that grounded her. They underestimated you, he said, his voice a quiet fire. They thought they could break you, but they don't know the woman I see. His words were a balm, soothing the raw edges of her pain, and she met his gaze, finding strength in the unwavering belief reflected in his eyes. She thought of the nights spent alone in her penthouse, the weight of the scandal pressing against her chest, the silence of Alberto's absence, a wound that refused to heal. But now, with Isaac's steady presence, she felt a shift, a spark of defiance that burned brighter with each revelation. "What else do we have?" she asked, her voice steady, her resolve a blade honed by pain. Isaac pulled up another file, a report compiled by a forensic accountant he'd hired. "Alberto's been playing a long game," he said, his tone grim. "He's been funneling money from Aquino Ventures into offshore accounts, millions. Polaris siphoned through shell companies disguised as vendor payments. The paper trail is messy, but it's there. We've got bank records, wire transfers, even emails where he bragged about his side hustle to a contact in the Caymans." Polaris's eyes widened, her heart a drumbeat of shock and anger. She had trusted Alberto with her company dreams and heart, and he had used that trust to steal from her. The betrayal was a wound cut deeper than the scandal, violating the love she had poured into their shared vision. "How did I not see this?" she murmured, her voice trembling with self-reproach. "I gave him everything, access, opportunities, my love, and he turned it against me." Isaac leaned closer, his voice soft but firm. "You loved him, Polaris. That's not a weakness, it's a strength. It's what makes you human, what makes you you. He's the one who failed, not you." His words were a lifeline, pulling her from the depths of doubt, and she felt a warmth spread through her, a reminder that she was not alone in this fight. They spent hours poring over the evidence, their voices blending in a symphony of strategy and resolve. Lena the hacker joined them via video call, her voice crackling with excitement as she shared her findings. She said that the PR firm, Silverstone Media, has a history of smear campaigns, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "I found a contract signed by someone named C. Reynolds." Sound familiar? Polaris's breath hitched. Catherine said the name had a bitter taste on her tongue. "She's behind this. She's always wanted what I have, my position, power, and life." The realization was a spark igniting a fire within her. Catherine, her friend, her confidant, had orchestrated this betrayal, using Alberto as a pawn in her ambition. Isaac nodded, his jaw tight. "We've got her," he said. "The contract, the emails, the video, it's all connected. But we need to be strategic. If we release this too soon, they'll spin it and turn it against you again. We must build an airtight case, something the board, the investors, and the press can't ignore." Polaris leaned back, her mind racing with possibilities. She thought of her mother, who had taught her to fight for what was hers, never to let the world define her worth. She thought of the villa, where she had stood in the wreckage of her love, recording the truth that would set her free. "What's our next step?" she asked, her voice a quiet storm, her eyes blazing with determination. "We go after the money," Isaac said, his voice steady. His plan, a map through the chaos. We subpoena the financial records and get the accountant to testify. At the same time, Lena's working on a digital footprint to link Catherine to the PR firm. And that video you took. He paused, his eyes meeting hers, a flicker of pride in his gaze. That's our ace. We hold it until the right moment when it'll hit them hardest. The loft seemed to pulse with their shared purpose, the air charged with the electricity of their plan. Polaris felt a shift within her, a reclamation of the strength she had thought lost. She looked at Isaac, his face illuminated by the laptop's glow, and saw not just a bodyguard, but a man who had chosen to stand with her and fight for her when the world turned away. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she said, her voice soft, her heart opening to a truth she hadn't yet named. "You've seen me at my worst, Isaac, and you're still here. Why?" He hesitated, his eyes softening as they met hers. "Because I've seen you at your best, too," he said, his voice a quiet vow. "I've seen the woman who built an empire from nothing, loved with her whole heart, and never gave up. I'm here because I believe in you, Polaris. Because you're worth fighting for." The words hung between them, a delicate thread weaving through the space that separated their wounded hearts. Polaris felt a warmth spread through her, a flicker of something new, fragile but undeniable. She thought of the nights she had spent alone, the weight of betrayal crushing her spirit, and realized that Isaac had been there, a silent guardian, long before she knew she needed him. As the night deepened, they continued their work, the loft a cocoon of hope and determination. Outside, Williamsburg buzzed with life artists, dreamers, rebels. Still within these walls, Polaris and Isaac were crafting a rebellion that would shake the foundations of those who had sought to destroy her. The city's lights twinkled like stars, a reminder that even in the darkest night there was light to be found. And Polaris, with Isaac by her side, was ready to claim it. The Manhattan morning dawned with a clarity that mirrored the fire in Polaris Aquino's heart. The city's skyline, a jagged silhouette of ambition and resilience, stretched before the glass walls of Aquino Ventures' boardroom, a cathedral of power perched on the 50th floor of a midtown tower. Polaris stood at the head of the polished mahogany table, her ebony skin radiant under the soft glow of recessed lights. Her dark curls swept into an elegant chignon that spoke of grace and authority. Her emerald green blazer hugged her frame, symbolizing her unyielding strength. Yet her brown eyes held a storm of emotions, pain, resolve, and a quiet fury forged in the crucible of betrayal. The boardroom was a theater of anticipation, its air thick with the scent of coffee and the weight of unspoken questions. The board members, a mix of Wall Street veterans and young disruptors, sat in hushed expectation, their eyes darting between Polaris and the two figures who had just entered. Alberto, his blonde hair meticulously styled, but his blue eyes shadowed with unease, and Catherine, her dark hair sleek, her face a mask of practiced composure. They believed they held the upper hand, their secret safe, their theft of Polaris's empire secure. But today, the tide would turn, and Polaris was the storm that would sweep them away. She took a deep breath, her hands steady as she adjusted the remote in her palm. Its cold metal reminded her of the truth she was about to unveil. The scandal that had painted her as a fallen titan, a fabricated video smeared her name across New York Post headlines, and X hashtags was a lie, and she had the evidence to prove it. More than that, she had the video from the Hamptons, a raw, undeniable record of Alberto and Catherine's betrayal, and the financial documents that exposed their theft from Aquino Ventures. This was her moment, her reckoning, and she would wield it with the precision of a blade. Thank you for coming. Polaris began, her voice a melody of calm authority, each word a note in a symphony of justice. The past weeks have been challenging, with rumors and lies threatening this company's legacy. But today, we set the record straight. Her eyes swept the room, locking briefly, with each board member, her presence commanding their attention like a star anchoring the night sky. Alberto shifted in his seat, his fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on the table. Catherine's smile was tight, her eyes flickering with a hint of fear she couldn't fully conceal. They underestimated her, believing her broken by the scandal, and her trust in them was a weakness they could exploit. But Polaris was no longer the woman who had danced with Alberto under the Hudson's glow, dreaming of lavender gardens. She was a warrior forged in pain. Today, she would reclaim her throne. She pressed a button on the remote, and the massive screen behind her flickered to life. Gasps rippled through the room as the video began to play. Not the fabricated scandal that had tarnished her name, but the raw footage from the Hamptons villa. There, in stark clarity, were Alberto and Catherine. Their bodies entwined, their laughter a cruel mockery of the love Polaris had given them. The board members leaned forward, their faces a mix of shock and disgust, their murmurs rising like a tide. "This," Polaris said, her voice cutting through the noise, "is the truth. While I fought to protect this company, to clear my name, these two conspired to destroy me." She turned to Alberto, her eyes piercing, her words a blade. "You used my trust, my love, to steal from me. Millions funneled into offshore accounts hidden behind shell companies you thought no one would trace." She gestured to a stack of documents on the table, meticulously compiled by Isaac's forensic accountant. "But we did trace them, Alberto. Every wire transfer, every fake invoice, every lie." Alberto's face paled, his hands trembling as he opened his mouth to protest. "Polaris, this is a misunderstanding," he began, but she silenced him with a raised hand, her gaze unyielding. "Don't," she said, her voice a quiet storm. "You don't get to lie to me anymore." She turned to Catherine, who sat frozen, her composure cracking like thin ice. "And you, Catherine, my friend, my sister, or so I believed. You orchestrated the scandal, paid for a deep fake to ruin me all, while smiling in my face. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I'd let you take everything I've built?" Catherine's lips parted, but no words came. The boardroom was silent, the weight of Polaris's truth pressing down on everyone. She clicked the remote again, and the screen shifted to a series of emails damning evidence of Catherine's contract with Silverstone Media, the PR firm behind the fake video. The board members exchanged glances, their expressions hardening as the depth of the betrayal sank in. "I trusted you both," Polaris continued, her voice softening, not with weakness, but with the ache of a heart that had loved too deeply. "I gave you my heart, my friendship, my dreams, and you repaid me with lies." She paused, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, but her resolve unshaken. "But I'm not here to beg for your remorse. I'm here to take back what's mine, my company, my name, my future." She turned to the board, her presence a beacon of strength. "Aquino Ventures is my legacy, built on years of sacrifice and defying odds in a world that wasn't always kind to a woman like me. I ask you now to stand with me, restore control of this company to the hands that built it, and reject those who sought to tear it down." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, the board members nodding, their faces reflecting a mix of admiration and resolve. One of them, an older man with silver hair, stood. He said, "Ms. Aquino, we've seen enough," his voice firm. "We'll vote to reinstate your full authority and investigate these allegations further. This company is yours, and we trust you to lead it." Alberto's face crumpled, his hands gripping the table as if to anchor himself against the tide of his unraveling lies. Catherine's eyes darted to the door, as if she could escape the consequences of her actions. But Polaris wasn't done. She signaled to security who entered the room with measured steps, their presence a silent command. "Escort them out," she said, her voice calm but final. "They no longer have a place here." As Alberto and Catherine were led away, their protests drowned by the boardroom's silence, Polaris stood tall, her heart pounding with triumph and sorrow. She had won this battle, but the war was not over. The scandal still lingered in the public's eye, and the wounds of betrayal ran deep. But as she looked out at the city, its skyline a testament to resilience, she felt a quiet strength rising within her, a promise that she would rebuild her company and herself. Outside, the Manhattan morning pulsed with life, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded in the tower above. Polaris lingered in the boardroom, her fingers tracing the edge of the table, her mind a whirlwind of memories and resolve. She thought of Isaac, waiting in the wings, his loyalty a light that had guided her through the darkness. This victory was theirs, a shared triumph born of trust and tenacity, and she knew that with him by her side, she could face whatever lay ahead. The city stretched before her, a canvas of possibility, and Polaris Aquino, with her heart bruised but unbroken, was ready to repaint her future. The autumn leaves danced along the cobblestone streets of Greenwich Village, their golden hues a quiet hymn to renewal. In a cozy cafe tucked beneath a canopy of ivy, Polaris Aquino sat by a window, her dark curls catching the soft light of a late afternoon sun. Her ebony skin glowed with a warmth that belied the storm she had weathered, her brown eyes reflecting a newfound peace. The scandal that had once threatened to define her was fading, its lies unraveling in the face of her truth. Aquino Ventures was hers again, its board firmly behind her. But the journey to reclaim her heart was only beginning. Across from her, Isaac sipped a black coffee, his hazel eyes steady, his presence a grounding force in the whirlwind of her recovery. His white skin contrasted with the cafe's warm tones, his dark hair slightly tousled, a rare vulnerability in his usually stoic demeanor. The cafe buzzed with the chatter of artists and students, the clink of cups a soft counterpoint to the jazz drifting from a vintage record player. But in their corner, the world seemed to pause their conversation, a delicate dance of healing and hope. "You did it," Isaac said, his voice a low melody, his eyes warm with pride. "The board, investors, and press are all on your side now. You turned their lies into your victory." He leaned forward, his hands clasped around his cup, his gaze never leaving hers. "You're unstoppable, Polaris." She smiled, a soft curve of her lips, holding gratitude and fragility. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said, her voice a whisper of sincerity. "You saw me when I was invisible, Isaac. When the world turned away, you stayed." Her fingers traced the rim of her teacup, a delicate porcelain vessel that seemed to hold the weight of her thoughts. "I don't know how to repay that." Isaac's smile was gentle, a rare glimpse of the man behind the bodyguard's armor. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "Being here, seeing you rise, it's enough." His words were a vow, a quiet promise wrapped around her heart like a warm embrace. She thought of the nights in the Williamsburg loft, where they had pored over evidence, their voices blending in a shared mission to reclaim her truth. She thought of the boardroom, where she had faced Alberto and Catherine, her strength bolstered by Isaac's unwavering support. The cafe's window framed the village's eclectic charm, street musicians, vintage bookstores. The pulse of a neighborhood thrived on reinvention. Polaris felt a kinship with this place, its spirit mirroring her journey from ruin to redemption. She had appeared on Forbes last week, her face gracing the cover with the headline, "The Comeback Queen Polaris, Aquino's Triumph Over Scandal." CNBC had invited her for an interview, where she spoke with quiet power, her words dismantling the lies that had sought to define her. The public was listening, their faith in her restored, but the scars of betrayal lingered, a quiet ache in her soul. "I keep thinking about them," she admitted, her voice soft, her eyes fixed on the steam rising from her tea. "Alberto, Catherine, they took so much from me. Not just the money and the company, but the belief that I could trust and love without fear." She paused, her fingers tightening around the cup, her heart a battlefield of memory and hope. How do you move past that, Isaac? How do you learn to trust again? Isaac's gaze softened, his eyes tracing the lines of her face, as if memorizing every curve, every shadow. He said, "You don't erase the pain," his voice a gentle tide. "You carry it, but you don't let it define you. You've already proven that, Polaris. You took their betrayal and turned it into your strength and trust." He hesitated, his hand inching closer to hers, a tentative bridge across the space between them. Trust comes when you find someone who sees you, not just for who you are now, but for who you're becoming. Her heart stirred, a quiet warmth blooming in the space where despair had once reigned. She thought of Alberto's promises, hollow words that had crumbled under the weight of his deceit. She thought of Catherine's smiles, a facade that had hidden a knife. But Isaac was different. His loyalty was a quiet constant, his presence a shelter in the storm. She remembered a moment in the loft when he had brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch so gentle, it had felt like a confession. She hadn't been ready then, her heart too raw. But now, in this cafe, she felt a shift, a whisper of possibility. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely audible, her eyes meeting his with a vulnerability she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months. Scared to let anyone in again, and scared to believe in something as fragile as love. Isaac's hand covered hers, his touch warm and steady, a promise etched in the calluses of his palm. "You don't have to be ready yet," he said, his voice a soft vow. "I'm not asking for anything you're not prepared to give, but I'm here, Polaris, and I'm not going anywhere. I've seen you at your lowest, and I've seen you rise. I'll wait as long as it takes." The words were a lifeline, pulling her from the depths of her fear. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just the bodyguard who had protected her, but the man who had believed in her when she had doubted herself. His hazel eyes held a quiet intensity, a depth that spoke of a heart that had known its own wounds, yet chose to love anyway. She thought of her mother, who had taught her that love was not a weakness, but a courage to risk pain for something greater. In Isaac, she saw that courage reflected in her. The cafe hummed around them, a tapestry of laughter and music, but in their corner time seemed to pause, the world narrowing to the space between their hands. Polaris felt a flutter in her chest, a spark of something new, something she wasn't ready to name, but couldn't ignore. "You're different," she said, her voice soft, her smile tentative. "You don't make promises you can't keep. You don't hide who you are." Isaac's smile was a sunrise, warm and hopeful. "I've got no reason to hide," he said. "Not from you." He paused, his thumb brushing lightly against her hand, a gesture so small yet so profound. "I've loved you for a long time, Polaris. Not because of your empire or your name, but because of you, the woman who fights dreams and never gives up. I'll wait until you're ready to see me the way I see you." Her breath caught her heart, a kaleidoscope of emotions: fear, hope, longing. She thought of the nights they had spent together, not in romance, but in partnership, their minds united in a shared mission. She thought of how he had stood by her in the boardroom, a silent strength as she faced her betrayers. And now in this cafe, with the world rebuilding around her, she felt the first stirrings of a love that was not a cage, but a freedom. They spent the afternoon talking, their words weaving a tapestry of healing. Polaris shared her plans to expand Aquino Ventures, mentor young women of color in finance, and turn her pain into purpose. Isaac listened, his eyes bright with admiration, his presence a reminder that she was not alone. They spoke of simpler things, 2 music books and the quiet beauty of a village sunset. And as the light faded, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet, Polaris felt a weight lift from her heart, a sense that she was not just surviving, but thriving. Outside, the village pulsed with life, its streets a canvas of possibility. Polaris stepped onto the sidewalk, Isaac at her side, their shoulders brushing as they walked. The city was hers again, not just its towers and boardrooms, but its heart, its soul. She thought of the future, not the one she had dreamed with Alberto, but a new one unwritten, waiting for her to shape it. And with Isaac by her side, his quiet strength a promise of tomorrow, she knew she was ready to rise, not just from the ashes, but into a life she could call her own. The rolling hills of upstate New York stretched beneath a sky painted in hues of rose and gold, a canvas of serenity that whispered of new beginnings. In a quaint vineyard, nestled among the autumnal splendor, Polaris Aquino stood beneath a canopy of white roses, her ebony skin glowing in the soft light of a late September afternoon. Her dark curls cascaded freely, adorned with delicate sprigs of lavender, a nod to the dreams she had once shared with a man who had betrayed her. Today, those dreams were reborn, not in the shadow of loss, but in the embrace of a love that had weathered her darkest storms. Her wedding dress, a flowing creation of ivory silk, shimmered like moonlight on water. Its simplicity was a testament to her strength and elegance, reflecting her grace. Beside her stood Isaac, his white skin catching the golden rays, his dark hair neatly swept back, his hazel eyes fixed on her with a devotion that felt like a vow etched in time. He wore a tailored navy suit, its crisp lines softening under the warmth of his smile, a smile that had become her anchor, her home. 3 years had passed since the scandal had nearly broken her, since the boardroom reckoning that had restored her empire. Aquino Ventures now thrived, a beacon of innovation on Wall Street, led by a woman who had turned betrayal into triumph. The headlines had shifted. Forbes called her the unbreakable Polaris Aquino. CNBC lauded her as a trailblazer for women of color in finance. But today, in this vineyard, she was not the CEO, not the warrior who had fought for her name. She was Polaris, a woman in love, standing hand in hand with the man who had seen her through the fire. The ceremony was intimate, gathering close friends and family, their laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves and the clink of wine glasses. Polaris's mother, a regal woman with graying curls, sat in the front row, her eyes glistening with pride. Isaac's parents, warm and unassuming, beamed from the sidelines, their presence a quiet testament to the family they were building. The officiant, a friend from Polaris's college days, spoke of love as a journey, a choice to stand together through storms and sunsets. Do you, Polaris, take Isaac as your partner to cherish and honor in joy and sorrow for all your life? The officiant asked, her voice a gentle melody. Polaris turned to Isaac, her brown eyes shimmering with tears of joy. I do, she said, her voice steady, resonant with a love that had grown from the ashes of betrayal. I choose you, Isaac, not just for today, but for every tomorrow, for every dream we'll build together. Her words were a vow, a promise woven from the threads of their shared journey, from the nights in the Williamsburg loft, where they had plotted her redemption, to the quiet moments in Greenwich Village, where their hearts had begun to entwine. Isaac's smile was a sunrise, his eyes locked on hers as he spoke his vows. Polaris, you are my strength, my inspiration, my home, he said, his voice, a low, fervent vow. I've loved you through every battle, every victory, and I promise to love you through every moment to come. You're my forever, and I'll stand by you always. His words were a lighthouse guiding her heart to a shore she had thought lost. And as he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, she felt a warmth that banished the last shadows of her past. The crowd erupted in applause as they kissed a gentle, lingering kiss that spoke of trust, rebuilt of wounds, healed of a fierce and tender love. The vineyard seemed to hold its breath, the world narrowing to the space between them, their love, a melody that drowned out the echoes of betrayal. As the evening unfolded, the celebration moved to a rustic barn, adorned with fairy lights, the air filled with the scent of harvest grapes and the sound of a jazz quartet. Polaris and Isaac danced their first dance to a soulful rendition of At Last, her head resting against his chest, his arms a sanctuary that felt like home. She thought of the woman she had been 3 years ago, weeping in her penthouse, her trust shattered by Alberto and Catherine. That woman had been a seed buried in darkness, but now she had bloomed her roots, anchored in the love she shared with Isaac. Their daughter Prim, born a year after the scandal's dust had settled, was the heart of their joy. At 18 months she toddled through the crowd, her tiny dress adorned with pink ribbons, her laughter a spark that lit up the night. Polaris scooped her up, her heart swelling as Prim's small hands reached for her face, her eyes mirroring Isaac's hazel gaze. "You're our miracle," Polaris whispered, pressing a kiss to Prim's forehead. Her love for her daughter, a fierce, boundless force. Isaac joined them, his arm slipping around Polaris's waist, his smile soft and unguarded. "She's got your spirit," he said, his voice warm with affection, fearless even at her age. He ruffled Prim's curls, and Polaris laughed, the sound a healing melody. "She's got your heart," she replied, her eyes meeting his, a silent acknowledgement of the love that had carried them here. They stood together, a family forged in resilience, their laughter mingling with the music as the night deepened. The guests danced and toasted their voices, a chorus of celebration. But for Polaris, the moment was a quiet triumph. She thought of the vineyard's rows, each vine a testament to patience and care, much like her own journey. She had lost so much: her trust, her dreams, her heart. But she had gained more: a true love, a family that was hers, a strength that no betrayal could shatter. As the stars emerged, casting a silver glow over the vineyard, Polaris and Isaac slipped away to a quiet corner, their hands entwined. "I never thought I'd find this," she said, her voice soft, her eyes tracing the constellations above. "After everything, Alberto, Catherine, the scandal, I thought love was a risk I couldn't take again. But you?" She turned to him, her heart laid bare. "You showed me it's worth it." Isaac's hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek with a tenderness that felt like a vow. He said, "You're worth every risk," his voice a quiet fire. "I loved you when you were fighting, when you were broken, when you were rising. I'll love you through every chapter, Polaris, because you're my home." Their kiss was a promise, a seal on a love that had been tested and proven true. The vineyard stretched around them, a world of possibility, and Polaris felt a peace she hadn't known in years. She was no longer the woman defined by betrayal, but a woman defined by her courage, her love, her resilience. And with Isaac and Prim by her side, she knew the dawn of her new life was beginning. The shores of Cape Cod shimmered under the late summer sun, the Atlantic's waves whispering secrets to the sand. Polaris Aquino stood on the beach, her bare feet sinking into the warm grains, her dark curls dancing in the salt-kissed breeze. Her ebony skin glowed with a radiance that spoke of battles won and wounds healed, her brown eyes reflecting the ocean's endless expanse. She wore a flowing white dress, its hem brushing the tide, symbolizing the peace she had fought so hard to claim. Beside her, Isaac walked with their daughter Prim in his arms. Her laughter, a melody that wove through the air, a testament to the family they had built from the ashes of betrayal. 3 years had passed since the boardroom reckoning, since Polaris had reclaimed Aquino Ventures, and her name from the lies of Alberto and Catherine. The company was stronger than ever, a titan on Wall Street, and its innovations were shaping the future of finance. Polaris had become a beacon for women of color, her story of resilience inspiring countless others. Forbes named her Entrepreneur of the Year Time, featured her on its 100 most influential list, and X was praised for her comeback. But here on this sun-drenched beach, she was not the CEO or icon. She was Polaris, a woman whose heart had found its home. Isaac's white skin caught the sunlight, his navy polo shirt casual yet elegant, his hazel eyes warm with a love that had grown through every trial. Prim now too giggled as she reached for a seashell, her tiny hands a mirror of her mother's determination. "Look, Mama," she squealed, holding up her treasure, and Polaris's heart swelled her laughter, mingling with the waves. "She's got your fire," Isaac said, his voice a soft caress, and his smile reflecting the joy they shared. He set Prim down, watching as she toddled toward the water, her pink sandals leaving tiny prints in the sand. "She's going to conquer the world, just like her mother." Polaris laughed, her eyes sparkling with a lightness she had thought lost forever. "She'll have to fight you for that title," she teased, slipping her hand into his, their fingers entwining like vines in a vineyard. "You've been my rock, Isaac, my partner in every sense." Her words were a confession, a recognition of the man who had stood by her when the world had turned away. They walked along the shore, Prim darting ahead, her laughter a beacon that drew them forward. Polaris thought of the journey that had brought them here, the scandal that had shattered her, the betrayal that had cut deeper than any knife, the quiet nights in Brooklyn, where Isaac's presence had been her salvation. She thought of Alberto and Catherine now, shadows in her past. Their names faded from relevance. They faced lawsuits and disgraced their empire of lies crumbling under the weight of truth. But Polaris felt no malice, only a quiet gratitude for the strength their betrayal had forced her to find. I used to ask myself why, she said, her voice soft, her eyes fixed on the horizon where sea met sky. Why me? Why did I have to lose so much to find myself? But now, standing here with you, with Prim, I understand. She turned to Isaac, her heart laid bare. Every wound, every tear, they led me to you, to this. Isaac's hand tightened around hers, his eyes a mirror of her emotions. You didn't just find yourself, Polaris, he said, his voice a gentle tide. You built yourself anew. You took their lies and turned them into your truth. And I'm honored to be part of that story. He paused, his thumb brushing her knuckles, a familiar yet always new gesture. I loved you then through the pain. I love you now in the joy. And I'll love you always, no matter what comes. Her breath caught her heart, a symphony of gratitude and love. She thought of their wedding in the vineyard, the vows they had spoken under a canopy of stars. She thought of Prim's first steps, her first word, Mama, a sound that had healed wounds she hadn't known still lingered. She thought of the nights they spent planning not just for her company, but for their family, their dreams, their forever. They sat on a blanket spread across the sand, Prim nestled between them, her tiny hands clutching a seashell as she babbled about the waves. Polaris leaned against Isaac, her head resting on his shoulder, the rhythm of his heartbeat, a lullaby that soothed her soul. "I want this forever," she said, her voice a whisper of longing. Not the headlines, not the accolades, but this us Prim, the quiet moments that feel like home. Isaac's arm slipped around her, his lips brushing her temple. "You have it," he said, his voice a vow. "This is our forever Polaris. No matter where life takes us, we'll always have this." His words were a promise, a seal on a love tested by fire and emerged stronger, brighter, and eternal. The sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, a canvas for their shared dreams. Prim yawned, her eyes fluttering as she curled into Polaris's lap, her seashell clutched tightly. Polaris stroked her daughter's curls, her heart swelling with a fierce love that felt like a force of nature. She thought of her mother, who had taught her that strength was rising, loving, and believing. She thought of the woman she had been broken by betrayal, and the woman she had become whole in the embrace of those who mattered most. As the stars began to emerge, their light, a mirror of the hope in her heart, Polaris looked at Isaac, her partner, her love, her home. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but resonant, "for seeing me, for staying, for loving me through it all." Isaac's smile was a beacon, his eyes alight with a love that needed no words. "You're my everything," he said, his voice a quiet fire. "And I'll spend every day showing you that." They sat silently, the waves a gentle lullaby, the world a canvas of possibility. Once defined by betrayal, Polaris Aquino was now defined by love, resilience, and the family she had built. The ocean stretched before them, endless and eternal, a reminder that even the deepest wounds could lead to the brightest shores. The story of Polaris and Isaac is more than a tale of betrayal and redemption. It's a testament to the power of resilience, the strength of love, and the courage to rise above adversity. Like Polaris, we all face moments that test our hearts, dreams, and resolve. But her journey reminds us that we are never alone, that our strength lies in the connections we forge and the truths we hold dear.